You're the beta who pays the bills. He's the alpha who gets my body, she bragged. So I canceled the bills. Now her alpha is in prison and her beta is gone. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The notification popped up on my screen. Rent transfer completed. I clicked it away, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. It was a good weight, most days. The weight of building a life. I stood from the desk and stretched, my back cracking after too many hours hunched over spreadsheets. The apartment was quiet, filled with the soft, expensive light of a Tuesday evening. We'd chosen the place together, but I'd signed the lease. My credit score, my stable job, my name on the dotted line. That was my role. The provider. The foundation. I walked into the kitchen, my socks silent on the engineered hardwood I'd paid to have refinished. The grocery delivery I'd ordered was still in bags on the counter. I started unpacking, putting away the organic kale, the artisanal bread, the imported olives, all of Lisa's preferences. I bought the fuel for the life she wanted to project. My eyes caught on the leg of the breakfast bar, wobbling slightly with every step. I sighed, but it was a fond sigh. This was part of it, too. I crouched, opening the cabinet beneath to find my toolkit. A compact, professional set I'd owned since my first apartment. I found the right wrench and set to work, tightening the bolt that had come loose. The wobbling stopped. Fixed. Stable. Reliable. That's when I saw it. Draped over the back of the Eames chair, the one Lisa had insisted was essential for the room's aesthetic, was a jacket. It wasn't mine. It was a bulky, black leather thing, studded and aggressive. The kind of jacket that announces its presence. I walked over and picked it up. The leather was thick, expensive. It smelled of cigarette smoke and a cloying, cheap cologne that was nothing like the subtle, woody scent I wore. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. The front door clicked open. Lisa breezed in, a bag from a boutique I couldn't afford slung over her arm. She was already on her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen, a smirk playing on her lips. "Did you remember to pay the concierge fee?" she asked without looking up. "And my Pilates class is auto-drafting tomorrow, so make sure the joint account is flush. I don't want an overdraft." I transferred the money for her class last week. I held up the jacket. "It's handled." "Whose is this?" She glanced up, her eyes flicking from me to the jacket and back to her screen. No guilt. No panic. Just mild annoyance at the interruption. "Oh, that." She waved a perfectly manicured hand, the diamonds in her wedding set wannabe ring catching the light. "Just Chad's. He left it here last night." Chad. The name was like a punch to the gut. A caricature. I'd heard the name before, in passing, as one of her new gym friends. "He left it here last night?" I repeated, my voice dangerously flat. "And why was Chad here last night?" "I was at the late meeting. You said you were going to bed early." She finally put her phone down, letting out a long-suffering sigh, as if I were a child struggling with basic algebra. She walked over to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of kombucha, and leaned against the counter, assessing me. "Mark," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "We need to have an adult conversation about boundaries and needs." I just stared, the leather of the jacket feeling gross and foreign in my hands. This was my home. The one I paid for. The one I fixed. The one I stocked with food. And this, Alpha's jacket, was draped over my chair like a flag planted on conquered land. In that moment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt like a programmer looking at a line of code that had just catastrophically failed. The system was broken, and I was the one who was going to have to fix it. But for now, I just stood there, holding the physical proof of my own irrelevance, waiting for the woman I loved to explain to me why I was the fool in my own home. The jacket hung between us, a black leather accusation. The air in our beautiful, expensive apartment grew thick and heavy. I could still smell that cologne on it, a pungent ghost in the room. "An adult conversation," I repeated, my voice still flat, devoid of the tremor I knew she expected. I let the jacket drop back onto the chair. "Okay, let's have one. Why was Chad in our apartment last night when I wasn't here?" Lisa took a long sip of her kombucha, buying time. She was formulating her argument, one I could tell she'd been rehearsing in her head for a while. "Mark," she began, with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. I was hoping you'd be smart enough to just understand the dynamic without me having to spell it out. But I guess that's too much to ask. The dynamic? I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. Enlighten me. She put her bottle down with a definitive click. You don't get it, do you? A woman has complex needs. A woman needs both. Both what, Lisa? I asked, my tone dangerously calm. What two things are so complex that they require another man's jacket on my chair? Passion and stability, she exclaimed, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He gives me passion. Fire. That raw, alpha energy you just don't have. You're predictable. Safe. You're the foundation. He's the fireworks. The words hung in the air, so absurd they were almost laughable. She was parroting some online guru's toxic mantra, using it to justify her betrayal. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice low and measured. I was no longer looking at my girlfriend. I was analyzing a critical system failure. I'm the beta who pays the bills, and he's the alpha who gets my girlfriend? She smiled then, a wide, relieved smile, as if I'd finally solved a difficult puzzle. See? You can be taught. It's not personal, Mark. It's biology. It's strategy. He makes me feel alive. You make me feel secure. She walked over and patted my arm, a condescending gesture that made my skin crawl. Now be a good beta and go transfer the rent before it's late. We can still have a nice life. You just need to accept your role in it. Be a good beta. The phrase echoed in the silent, spacious apartment I paid for. I looked at her, at the woman I'd planned a future with, the woman for whom I'd worked endless overtime to buy the ring she was already wearing, the woman whose life I had built my entire world around. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break, it shifted. The emotional connection, the love, the hurt, it all evaporated, leaving behind a crystalline clarity. This wasn't a relationship. It was a parasitic arrangement. She saw me not as a partner, but as a utility, a reliable, boring appliance. My internal monologue, once filled with plans for our future, now clicked over with the cold, efficient logic of a termination protocol. Query: define relationship parameters. Response: provider, beta, and user, alpha. Query: is this a sustainable and respectful dynamic? Response: negative. System integrity compromised. Directive: initiate shutdown sequence. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't tell her she was a shallow, manipulative cliché. There was no point. You can't reason with a virus. You just quarantine and eliminate it. I looked at her, my expression as unreadable as a stone wall. The rent, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. She mistook my calm for submission. Yes, the rent. It's due tomorrow. Don't forget. I won't, I said. And I meant it. I wouldn't forget any of this. But my understanding of the task had fundamentally changed. It was no longer about maintaining the system. It was about pulling the plug. I turned and walked away from her, back toward the home office. Not to transfer the rent, but to start planning my exit. The beta was about to log out. For good. I didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I didn't drink. I sat in the dark of the home office, the blue glow of my laptop the only light, and I planned. This wasn't an emotional retreat. It was a strategic extraction. My mind, once cluttered with the emotional debris of her betrayal, was now a clean, white room. Every action was logical, sequential, and precise. Step 1. Financial securement. I logged into our joint bank account. The one I funded, the one she drained. I didn't touch the money she'd put in, a pittance from her part-time gig that she mostly spent on herself. But my direct deposits, the ones that paid for our life, I initiated an immediate transfer of exactly half of the current balance to my personal account. It was more than fair. Then, I removed myself as a joint owner. The process would take 24 hours. By the time she noticed, I'd be gone. Next, I logged into the property management portal. I canceled the automatic rent payment scheduled for tomorrow. Then, I navigated to the utility websites, electricity, water, gas, internet, and submitted requests to terminate service in my name, effective at the end of the current billing cycle. I provided my new forwarding address for the final bills, a P.O. box I'd rented online minutes before. Step 2. Asset assessment. What was mine? What was essential? The furniture, the decor, the vast majority of the kitchenware. It was all chosen by her, for her. I felt no attachment to any of it. It was set dressing for a play that had just closed. I opened the closet and pulled out a single, hard-shell suitcase. Into it, I placed my passport, birth certificate, and social security card, my laptop and backup drives, my professional toolkit, a small box of personal items, the watch my father gave me for graduation, a few first editions of my favorite books, a single photograph of me and my late dog, taken on a hiking trip years before I met Lisa. I took my clothes, the functional, well-made ones I preferred, ignoring the expensive designer items she'd bought me to fit her aesthetic. They filled one side of the suitcase. That was it. One suitcase and my toolkit. The entirety of my life, distilled into two objects. Step 3. The Ghost Protocol. As the first rays of dawn tinted the sky, I made one final sweep. I deleted my profiles from the shared streaming services. I changed the passwords to every account that was solely in my name. I left the key to the P.O. box in an envelope on the kitchen counter. No note. No explanation. She had been so clear about the nature of our relationship. She didn't deserve the courtesy of a goodbye. She'd already explained everything. I stood by the front door, suitcase in one hand, toolkit in the other. I took one last look at the apartment. The sleek, cold perfection of it. The Eames chair with the leather jacket still slung over it. It wasn't a home. It was a stage. And I was done being a prop. My internal monologue was serene, final. The foundation is withdrawing. Let's see how the structure holds. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, pulling it closed behind me. The click of the lock was soft, definitive. I didn't look back. I walked to the elevator, rode it down to the garage, and loaded my life into the trunk of my car. As I drove away from the building, the sun finally cresting the skyline, I felt nothing but a vast, clean emptiness. It wasn't sadness. It was potential. The silence in the car wasn't lonely. It was clean. I was no longer a beta provider. I was just a man, free of a parasite, heading toward a future I now owned entirely. The program was shutting down, and it was executing perfectly. The short-term rental was a furnished studio, a blank canvas beige box in a building full of transients. It was perfect. There were no memories here, no lingering scent of her perfume, no aggressive leather jackets. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant, muffled city. It was the most peaceful silence I'd ever heard. My new routine was monastic, and I cherished it. Up at 6 a.m., a run along the river, the cold air scouring my lungs clean. The gym, where I pushed my body until it was too tired to feel anything but the burn of muscle. Work, which I now did from the sterile comfort of the studio, my focus sharper than ever. I was a system rebooting, purging corrupted data and running clean, efficient code. I'd gotten a new phone number, but I kept the old one active on a cheap burner phone I kept in a drawer. I wasn't hoping for anything. It was a data-gathering exercise, a way to monitor the collapse from a safe distance. A week after I left, the burner phone lit up. The first voicemail was pure, unadulterated annoyance. Her voice was a sharp, entitled whine. "Mark, the internet is down. I've reset the router twice. What's the deal? I have a client video call tomorrow. This is so inconvenient. Call me back." I deleted it. The internet wasn't down. The account was closed. The first domino had fallen. 2 days later, the tone shifted. The second voicemail was laced with panic. "The power company says the account is closed." I came home, and the clocks were blinking. "What did you do?" "I have a client meeting here tomorrow. This isn't funny. You need to fix this right now." I pictured her in the dark, expensive apartment, the silence no longer peaceful but accusing. The foundation was cracking, and she was just noticing the tremors. I deleted the message. The third voicemail was a masterpiece of furious entitlement. It came a day after the second, her voice trembling with rage. "I got an eviction notice. A fucking eviction notice. They taped it to the door. Where are you? You can't just abandon your responsibilities. You can't just leave me here to deal with this. Call me. Fix this." I almost smiled. Her responsibilities. Her problem. The beta had not only left the building, he'd canceled the lease on her reality. I was about to turn the phone off for good when my new phone rang. It was Dave, a mutual friend from my old life. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. I needed the final data point. "Mark? Hey man, you alive?" Dave's voice was cautious. "I'm here, Dave. What's up?" "Dude, have you heard about Lisa?" he asked, his tone a mix of gossip and genuine concern. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window of my sterile box at the city skyline. No, it was the truth. I hadn't heard. I had engineered. It's a mess, Dave said, launching in. She got evicted. Like, officially. I helped her move her stuff into a storage unit yesterday. She was a wreck, crying, saying you just vanished. I said nothing. The silence stretched. And that's not even the worst of it, Dave continued, lowering his voice. Her boy toy, Chad? The alpha? He said the word with audible scorn. Yeah, he's not just a bad boy. He's a legit violent asshole. Got into a bar fight and put a guy in the hospital with a fractured skull. They tacked on some old warrants for assault and possession. He's not getting out. He's looking at 3 to 5 years, easy. I absorbed the information. It was the final variable, solving for X. The alpha trait of violence wasn't a thrilling abstraction. It was a concrete reality with prison bars. Aren't you? I don't know, sorry for her. Dave finally asked, baffled by my silence. I looked around my clean, quiet, peaceful studio. I thought of the eviction, the darkness, the prison sentence. She had chosen chaos over stability, and the universe had given her exactly what she'd asked for, in spades. She made her choice, I said, my voice even in calm. She valued his traits. Now she has them. Permanently. I ended the call with Dave, the final thread to my old life severed. I picked up the burner phone, listened to Lisa's 3 voicemails one last time. The annoyance, the panic, the rage, a perfect symphony of consequences. Then I powered it off, removed the SIM card, and snapped it in half. The unraveling was complete. My work was done. 3 months to the day after I'd walked out, I was in my new apartment. It wasn't a sterile studio anymore. I'd signed a lease on a place with more space, with a view of the park. It was filled with my books, my simple, functional furniture, and a profound, unbroken peace. I was hanging a framed vintage map when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was an unknown number. Most people would ignore it, but I was expecting a callback from a client. I answered with a professional, Mark speaking. The line was filled with the hollow static of a bad connection and the distant roar of traffic. Then, a ragged, choked whisper. Mark? Oh God, Mark, it's me. It was Lisa. Her voice was stripped raw, stripped of all its former condescending polish. She sounded small, broken, and terrifyingly desperate. I didn't hang up. I felt nothing but a distant, academic curiosity. This was the final data point in the experiment. What do you need, Lisa? My voice was calm, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the tone I used with telemarketers. A sob escaped her, harsh and ugly. I need you. I need you back. I was stupid. I get it now. You were the rock. You were the good one. You were the stable one. The words were meant to be a compliment, but they were just a reaffirmation of her transactional worldview. She wasn't apologizing for her cruelty. She was begging for the return of a service she missed. I could have unleashed a torrent of well-deserved venom. I could have listed every sacrifice, every ignored slight, every ounce of pain. But that would have required emotional energy. Energy she was no longer worth. So, I used her own language. The language of dynamics and strategy. You misunderstand, I said, my tone that of an engineer stating an irrefutable fact. You spoke of a dynamic. Alpha and beta. The function of the beta, in your own words, was to provide stability, to ensure survival. Yes, she sobbed, mistaking my analysis for a negotiation. And I need that. I need you to be that for me. I have nothing. I'm living in my car. Chad's in prison. I have nowhere to go. Her desperation was a tidal wave, and I was a granite cliff. No, I said, the single syllable final and absolute. You failed the basic premise. You allied with a variable that introduced systemic failure. The beta's purpose is nullified. There was a stunned silence on the other end, broken only by the rush of passing trucks. I could almost hear her brain, addled by panic and grief, struggling to process the cold, hard logic. What are you saying? She whispered. I'm stating a fact, I replied. You have failed to survive. The program is terminated. A sharp, horrified intake of breath. Then, her voice hardened, the true, ugly colors finally showing through the tears. You're actually a monster. You're just going to leave me like this. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She had left me the moment she decided I was a utility. She had left me for a fantasy. Now, faced with the consequences of her own choices, I was the monster for not cleaning up the mess. No, I said, my voice still perfectly even. I'm just a realist. Goodbye, Lisa. I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't feel a surge of victory or closure. I simply placed it back on the counter and looked out at the park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was beautiful. I picked up my hammer and finished hanging the map. It was a detailed survey of a mountain range I planned to hike next summer. A new challenge. A new frontier. The phone was silent. It would remain silent. The chapter was over, not with a bang, but with the quiet, definitive click of a disconnecting call. The program was terminated. And for the first time in a long, long time, my world was running perfectly. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.